Hey Grace Church, my name is Josh. Welcome to the weekly for the week of May 22nd. Today we are talking about Jesus sending out the 12. So in Mark chapter 6, we get to this part of the story where Jesus turns to the disciples and says, hey, it's your turn to go out and do what I've been doing. So for the first 5-6 chapters of Mark, the disciples are primarily spectators. They've been watching Jesus do miracles. They've been watching him teach. They've been watching him heal. And then in Mark 6, they have like this first trial, mini commissioning of sorts, where he sends them out to do the things he has been doing. And so we talked about the square, which is really just a leadership process of I do, you watch, followed by I do, you help, followed by you do, I help, followed by you do, I watch. And that forms the shape of a square. I know that's a lot to keep up with. But Jesus has ultimately been doing that with his disciples. And this is the moment he turns and he says, you're going to do it. Everything that I've been doing, you're actually going to do. And he gives them the authority and he sends them out 2 by 2. And then he tells them something as a part of the strategy, that as they go out, they are to look for places and people that receive them peacefully. And that is so key to the strategy going forward. And this idea of people receiving them peacefully is tied all the way back to his strategy as our Savior, that he fully intended to start a disciple-making movement. That disciple-making movement would to be sending disciples into the world to make more disciples, to raise awareness of the kingdom, and to spread the good news. And as we go out, we're looking for what's called people of peace. But right away, we recognize that this isn't typically how we do it. There's 3 ways that evangelism typically works in the church world. Number 1 is like servant evangelism, where we go out and we serve people and we meet needs and we hope that somehow this will lead to a gospel conversation, and that's good. Another option is what's called cold turkey evangelism, which is you go out and you have gospel conversations with people you've never met before, and you hope that leads to relationships, and maybe that would even lead to salvation. That's also good. The third thing is like Sunday service evangelism, where essentially you bring your friends to church and you kind of allow the church to evangelize them or the pastor to evangelize them, and you share the gospel that way through maybe an altar call. And so those are the strategies that we use often as the church, but when we look at Mark chapter 6, we see that Jesus has a different strategy. He sends out the 12, 2 by 2, with a laser-focused mission. He tells them the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few, and I'm the Lord of the harvest. So you're going to go out and look for people who receive you peacefully. And this gives us the phrase person of peace. And here's the definition. A person of peace is someone God has prepared ahead of time to hear the gospel message through you. One more time. Person of peace, someone who God has prepared ahead of time that they would hear the gospel message through you. And this is so beautiful as it's connected to a bigger theology, because what the person of peace proves to us, and I hope this gives you great comfort, it proves to you that God He's a missionary God, and he goes before you. So he's going before you, reaching out to people even before you get there. And the person of peace is proof, it's evidence that God is already working in that community. And that's great news for us. There are several examples of people of peace in the New Testament. You've got the centurion in Luke chapter 7. You've got the Samaritan woman in John 4. The Ethiopian eunuch in Acts chapter 8. Cornelius in Acts 10. Lydia in Acts 16. The Philippian jailer in Acts 16 as well. And these are people that are non-believers, but they welcome the disciples in, and they show that there's a seed. It's a metaphor of like the seed in the harvest. They represent the seed that ultimately could bring about the harvest. And so that strategy has now been given to us as disciple makers as well. And so here's how that works out in a typical house church. And this is where it gets really practical. And so I hope that you can put this stuff into practice, because this goes all the way back to the New Testament. When Jesse said that maybe the future of the church looks like the past, this is kind of what we mean, is that as house churches, we would take on the strategy of Jesus and we would walk forward in this way. So number 1, as a house church, could we identify a missional focus and start praying? So a missional focus would be an elementary school, a neighborhood, maybe a workplace that you all work at or are connected to, and you find a group of people and you start praying for them. And then secondly, so you identify missional focus. Secondly, you start meeting those new people and meeting needs. So you see like, hey, there's a need here. and I'm going to use my house church to meet that need. And as we meet people and as we meet needs, we're going to, third thing, out ourselves as followers of Jesus. Number one, find a focus and pray. Number two, engage that focus, start meeting needs. Three, out yourself as a follower of Jesus. Make sure they know, hey, we love Jesus. We're a part of this church. We're connected here. And then four, as you do that, find a place, meet needs, out yourself as a follower of Jesus. You're going to find two kinds of people. One will be people of unpeace, or people that aren't interested at all in what you're doing. And two, people of peace that would say, wow, this is awesome. We welcome you in. This is great news. And so from that sequence, you will be doing the very same thing the disciples did in Mark chapter 6. And we can see in our day maybe what they saw in theirs. So this is not particularly easy, and it wasn't easy for the disciples. In the parallel passage of Mark 6, you see in Luke chapter 10, when Jesus sends out the disciples, he says he's sending them out as sheep amongst wolves. And so there's an element of fear here, there's an element of danger here, and we're not anticipating this to be particularly easy for you. But the hope is you would depend on God. You would want to participate in the mission so much so that you're willing to risk it. You're willing to go into that place of fear and depend on God. And then you see that He's already working in that place. And that can increase your faith and move you forward. And that's a beautiful place to be as a follower of Jesus. And the risk that we have to take is the same risk the 12 took when they were sent out by Jesus. We have to be willing to cross the line, to out ourselves as believers and risk the scorn of this world, risk the rejection of this world, so that we can recognize people of peace and be used by God to engage those people and find a whole missionary harvest among our neighborhoods and our places of work. But that's the ask. And so this particular passage is deep into missionary strategy. This is how God used the early disciples, and it's how we see Him using us today. So as we get into this content, I want to ask you a question that maybe brings back some memories you don't want to remember. But when you were a kid and you think about peace versus unrest, were you bullied as a kid? Like, did you have people coming against you who were not kind, or were you the bully as a kid? And as you think through that, you'll want peace. You'll want the people of peace to be around. So that's a great way to get us going in this conversation. Your leader will take it from there and has multiple questions they would like to ask you. We love you, Grace Church, and we'll see you at church on Sunday.